In the early 1920s, deep in the sun-bleached quarries of Taung, South Africa, a discovery was waiting beneath the layers of ancient limestone, a discovery that would shake the foundations of science. Let's dig into it. Workers chiseled through rock, unaware that inside one of the blocks lay a face frozen in time. When the crate arrived at the University of Witwatersrand, anatomist Raymond Dart opened it with curiosity of a man who sensed opportunity. What he found was astonishing. The tiny skull of a child, its features a mosaic of familiar and alien. The brain was small, no larger than that of a chimpanzee, yet the position of the foramen magnum, the hole where the spine meets the skull, told a different story. This child had walked upright. Dart held in his hands a being that defied the scientific dogma of the age. He named it Australopithecus Africanus, the southern ape of Africa, and dared to propose that humanity's earliest roots were African, not European. But the world wasn't ready. The Piltdown Man hoax still dominated the narrative, a supposed early human from England with a large brain and primitive jaw, perfectly fitting the Eurocentric belief that intelligence came first. Dart's fossil contradicted everything. It was African, it was small-brained, and it was upright. The scientific establishment dismissed him. Journals refused his papers. Scholars mocked his conclusions. For decades, Dart stood alone, defending a fossil that the world refused to accept. But time has a way of revealing truth. As more fossils emerged from caves in South Africa, and as the Piltdown Man was exposed as a fraud, the Taung child rose from obscurity to become one of the most important discoveries in the history of paleoanthropology. It was the first whispers of a story that would eventually lead us to a story not written in Europe, but in Africa. The Taung child represents one of the most significant turning points in the study of human evolution. Dated to approximately 2.8 million years ago, the specimen preserves both a facial skeleton and an endocast, a natural mold of the brain's surface. This endocast provides a rare insight into early hominin neuroanatomy. The brain volume, estimated at 405 cc's, is within the range of modern chimpanzees, yet the morphology reveals early signs of human-like reorganization. The lunate sulcus, a major brain fold associated with visual processing, appears shifted posteriorly, suggesting an expansion of parietal association areas, regions linked to spatial reasoning and early cognitive complexity. The position of the foramen magnum is one of the strongest indicators of habitual bipedalism. In quadrupedal apes, it sits towards the back of the skull. In the Taung child, it's positioned centrally beneath the cranium, aligning the head atop an upright spine. This single anatomical feature was Dart's most compelling argument for bipedal locomotion. Dart's interpretation was initially rejected due to the dominance of the Piltdown fossil, which falsely suggested brain expansion preceded bipedalism. The Taung child contradicted this sequence, showing that upright walking evolved millions of years before significant brain enlargement. It wasn't until the 1940s and 1950s when Robert Broom uncovered an adult Australopithecus Africanus specimen at Sterkfontein and Makapansgat that Dart's claim gained traction. These confirmed that the Taung child was not an anomaly, but part of a broader species with consistent anatomical traits. Taphonomic analysis later revealed that the Taung child was likely killed by a large raptor. Puncture marks in the orbits match those produced by modern crowned eagles, providing rare evidence of predation on early hominins. This insight reshaped our understanding of the ecological pressures faced by Australopiths. The Taung child remains a cornerstone of paleoanthropology, the first fossil to demonstrate that early hominins were small-brained bipeds, and the first to firmly place human origins in Africa. South Africa's Cradle of Humankind is a landscape carved by time, a rolling expanse of dolomite hills, sun-baked grasslands, and hidden caverns that plunge deep into the earth. To the untrained eye, it looks peaceful, almost ordinary. But beneath the soil lies one of the richest archives of ancient life on this planet. Millions of years ago, these caves were natural traps. Rainwater dissolved the limestone, forming vertical shafts that opened like mouths in the ground. Animals that wandered too close slipped and fell into the darkness. Predators dragged their kills inside to feed. Over time, bones, sediment, and debris accumulated layer upon layer, sealing the past in stone. It was in these caves, Sterkfontein, Makapansgat, Gladys Vale, and others, that the story of Australopithecus Africanus slowly emerged. Sterkfontein, with its labyrinth of chambers, yielded hundreds of hominin fossils, including the iconic Miss Pless, whose face became the symbol of early African ancestry. Makapansgat offered its own mysteries. Bone fragments once thought to be used as tools, a strange pebble shaped like a human face, carried miles from its origin. Gladys Vale, rediscovered after decades of silence, revealed new remains that expanded the species' known range. These caves are more than fossil sites. They're time capsules. Inside them, the air feels heavy, as if the past still lingers in the shadows. Every bone, every tooth, every fragment of ancient life tells a story of survival, death, and the relentless march of evolution. The cradle of humankind is not just a place where fossils are found. It is a place where the boundary between the past and the present feels thin, where echoes of ancient footsteps seem to whisper through the stone. The fossil sites associated with Australopithecus africanus are among the most scientifically important paleoanthropological localities in the world. These sites are primarily located within the dolomitic limestone formations of South Africa's Mulmani subgroup, where karst processes created extensive cave systems. Over millions of years, these caves accumulated breccia, a cemented mixture of sediment, bones, and rock fragments that preserved hominin remains in exceptional detail. Sterkfontein is the most prolific source of Australopithecus africanus fossils. The site contains multiple stratigraphic members, with member 4 being the richest in Australopith remains. Radiometric dating places member 4 between 2.6 and 2.1 million years old, though some estimates extend slightly earlier. The assemblage includes cranial, dental, and postcranial elements, providing a comprehensive view of the species' anatomy. The STS-5 cranium, Miss Pless, and the STS-14 postcranial skeleton are the most significant finds, offering critical evidence for bipedal locomotion and cranial morphology. Makapansgat Limeworks, located in the Limpopo province, preserves a different ecological context. The site's member 3 deposits contain numerous Australopithecus africanus fossils, along with a diverse faunal assemblage. Early interpretations by Raymond Dart suggested that bone accumulations represented deliberate tool use. That so-called osteodontochoratic culture, later taphonomic studies, disprove this, showing that carnivores were responsible for the bone concentration. However, the site remains crucial for understanding Australopith ecology and predator-prey dynamics. The Makapansgat pebble, A jasperite stone resembling a human face was found in the same deposits. Geographical analysis shows it originated several kilometers away, suggesting it was transported, possibly by Australopithecus africanus. While not evidence of symbolic behavior, this raises intriguing questions about early pattern recognition. Gladys Vale Cave, rediscovered in the 1990s, produced the first new hominin fossils from the cradle of humankind in nearly half a century. The remains include fragments attributed to Australopithecus africanus, expanding the known geographic distribution of the species. The site also preserves faunal and environmental data that help reconstruct the paleoecology of the region. The cave sites share common taphonomic processes. Vertical shafts acted as natural traps. Carnivores contributed to bone accumulations. Sediments gradually encased remains in breccia. Calcite flowstones sealed deposits, aiding preservation. These processes created a unique fossil record that captures not only hominid anatomy, but also broader ecological context. Predators, prey species, vegetation indicators, and climate signatures. These sites form a multi-layer archive of early hominin life, offering unparalleled insight into the biology, behavior, and environment of Australopithecus africanus. To understand Australopithecus africanus, we must reconstruct the body that carried them through the world of predators, shifting climates, and evolutionary crossroads. Their bones tell a story of transition, a species no longer fully ape, yet not fully human. When we look at their skulls, we see the echoes of our distant past, a small brain case, rounded and compact, holding a mind just beginning to recognize itself. The face projects forward, but not as dramatically as in earlier Australopiths. The cheekbones flare gently, the jaws robust yet refined, and the teeth, thick enameled and human-shaped, speak of a diet that demanded strength and versatility. But it's the body that reveals the most profound transformation. Their pelvis is short and wide, reshaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure to support upright walking. The femur angles inward, bringing the knees beneath the center of gravity, allowing them to stride across the savanna with surprising efficiency. The spine curves in a gentle S shape, balancing the torso above the hips and cushioning each step. These are hallmarks of a committed biped, a creature that walked upright as naturally as we do. Yet their arms tell a different story. Long, powerful, and built for climbing. They reveal a species still deeply connected to the trees. Their fingers are curved, their shoulders high and mobile, their upper body strong enough to pull themselves into branches when danger approached. They lived in two worlds at once, the open ground and the forest canopy, navigating both with a grace that modern humans have long since lost. Their feet, too, reflect this duality. The heel is broad and human-like, built to absorb the impact of walking. But the midfoot remains flexible, capable of gripping branches. They were walkers and climbers, ground dwellers and tree dwellers, a species perfectly adapted to a landscape that demanded versatility. In Australopithecus africanus, we see the blueprint of humanity emerging. Not in a sudden leap, but in a gradual mosaic transformation. Their bodies were experiments in evolution, testing new forms, new functions, and new possibilities. They were the bridge between what we were and what we would become. The anatomy of Australopithecus africanus provides one of the clearest windows into the evolutionary transition from arboreal primates to fully terrestrial bipeds. Their cranial, dental, and postcranial morphology reflect a complex interplay of ancestral traits and derived adaptations. The cranial capacity of Australopithecus africanus ranges from 420 to 510 cc's, overlapping with Australopithecus afarensis, but showing a subtle increase in cortical reorganization. Endocasts revealed posterior displacement of the lunate sulcus, expansion of parietal association areas, early development of Broca's cap region, and increased hemispheric asymmetry. These features suggest enhanced visuospatial integration, improved motor planning, and early foundations for proto-linguistic capabilities. The cranial vault is more rounded than earlier Australopiths, with reduced nuchal musculature indicating a more balanced head posture consistent with habitual bipedalism. The face of Australopithecus africanus is less prognathic than that of Afarensis, with the reduced subnasal projection, moderate zygomatic flare, parabolic dental arcade, thick enamel, and reduced canine dimorphism. Microwear patterns show a mixed diet of soft fruits, hard objects, and fibrous vegetation. Enamel isotopes indicate consumption of both C3 and C4 plants, reflecting ecological flexibility. The pelvis of Australopithecus africanus is one of the most important indicators of bipedalism. The ilia are short and broad, reoriented laterally to stabilize the trunk during single-leg stance. The sacrum is wide, supporting lumbar lordosis. The femoral neck is elongated and the valgus angle is pronounced, aligning with the knees beneath the body's center of mass. The vertical column shows lumbar wedging consistent with an S-shaped curvature, essential for shock absorption and upright posture. Despite their bipedal adaptations, Australopithecus africanus retains numerous arboreal traits. Long humeri, cranially oriented glenoid fossa, robust clavicles, and curved manual phalanges. These features indicate powerful climbing abilities, suggesting that arboreal refuge remained a key survival strategy. The hand exhibits a well-developed oppens pollicis, enhanced precision grip capabilities, and intermediate phalangeal curvature. The foot combines a human-like calcaneus, partially adducted halix, and a flexible midfoot. This mosaic of structure supports both terrestrial bipedalism and arboreal grasping. The males average 40 to 50 kilograms, while females average 30 to 40, with height estimates of 110 to 140 centimeters. Dimorphism levels suggest moderate male competition, possibly with multi-male, multi-female social groups. The anatomy of Australopithecus africanus reflects a species adapted to efficient terrestrial bipedalism, arboreal climbing for safety and foraging, dietary flexibility, and complex social behavior. This combination of traits positions Australopithecus africanus as a key transitional form in hominid evolution, bridging the gap between earlier Australopiths and the emergence of genus Homo. To understand Australopithecus africanus, we must step into the world they inhabited, a world of shifting landscapes, unpredictable seasons, and constant danger. 3 million years ago, South Africa was not the dry, open savanna we imagine it today. It was a mosaic of environments, patches of dense woodland clustered around rivers, open grasslands stretching towards the horizon, rocky outcrops rising from the earth, and seasonal wetlands that came alive with life after the rains. This was a land in transition, shaped by cycles of drought and abundance, where survival demanded flexibility. In this ever-changing world, Australopithecus africanus became the master of adaptation. Their teeth tell the story, thick enamel built to withstand the grinding of tough vegetation, molars shaped for crushing, and wear patterns that reveal a diet far more varied than once believed. They ate fruits when the trees were heavy with ripening sweetness. They dug roots and tubers when the dry season stripped the land bare. They cracked nuts and seeds when other foods grew scarce. They may have even scavenged meat when opportunity allowed, using stones or bones to break open marrow-rich bones left behind by predators. But food wasn't the only part of their struggle. The land was alive with predators. Saber-toothed cats crouched in the tall grass. Hyenas prowled the night,
and leopards stalked the rocky cliffs. Even the skies were dangerous. The Taung child with its haunting puncture marks remind us that the giant eagles hunted early hominins, swooping down with silent wings to snatch the vulnerable. For Australopithecus africanus, every day was a negotiation between hunger and safety. They moved through this landscape with a dual strategy, walking upright across the ground, scanning for danger, and climbing trees when threats drew near. Their bodies were built for both worlds. Feet strong enough for long-distance walking, hands curved for gripping branches. They lived in small groups, relying on one another for protection, foraging, and the shared knowledge of where food and water could be found. In this world of uncertainty, Australopithecus africanus survived not through strength alone, but through adaptability. They were opportunists, improvisers, and survivors. Creatures shaped by a land that demanded resilience. Their ability to thrive in such a dynamic environment laid the groundwork for flexibility that would one day define the human lineage. The diet and ecology of Australopithecus africanus has been reconstructed through a combination of microwear analysis, stable isotope studies, dental morphology, faunal associations, and paleoenvironmental reconstruction. Together, these data reveal a species with remarkable dietary flexibility and ecological adaptability. Microscopic wear patterns on molars show a combination of fine scratches associated with soft fruits and leaves, deep pits associated with hard object feeding, and complex textures indicating fallback foods during seasonal scarcity. This suggests a diet that varied seasonally and regionally, consistent with the generalist foraging strategy. Carbon isotope ratios extracted from the tooth enamel reveal a mixed diet incorporating both C3 and C4 plants, C3 being fruits, leaves, woodland vegetation, and C4 being grasses, sedges, and open habitat resources. This isotope signature distinguishes Australopithecus africanus from more specialized hominids like Paleanthropus robustus, which show stronger C4 signals. The mixed isotope profile indicates Australopithecus africanus exploited multiple ecological niches and was not restricted to forested environments. The thick enamel and robust molars of Australopithecus africanus are adaptations for processing mechanically challenging foods. Finite element analysis of molar structure suggests that the teeth were capable of withstanding high bite forces, supporting the hypothesis that hard objects, nuts, seeds, and possibly underground storage organs, were important fallback foods. Faunal assemblages from Sterkfontein and Makapansgat indicate heterogeneous environment with woodland and forest patches, open grasslands, rocky escarpments, and seasonal wetlands. The presence of both arboreal and terrestrial fauna support the interpretation of a mixed habitat. Pollen and phytolith analysis further confirm the coexistence of grasses and woody vegetation. Predators contemporary with Africanus included Dinofelis, saber-toothed cats, Meganterian, early Panthera species, Pachycrocuta, giant hyenas, and large raptors. Taphonomic evidence, including tooth marks and puncture patterns, indicate that predation pressure was significant. Juveniles were particularly vulnerable, as demonstrated by the Taung child's cranial damage consistent with eagle predation. Postcranial anatomy suggests dual locomotor repertoire, habitual terrestrial bipedalism, and retained arboreal competence. Combination allowed Africanus to exploit both ground and canopy resources, enhancing survival in predator-rich environments. Based on primate analogs and anatomical evidence, Africanus likely engaged in opportunistic scavenging, digging for tubers, fruit harvesting, nut cracking, and even termite probing. These behaviors reflect a flexible foraging strategy that would later characterize early Homo. The adaptability of Australopithecus africanus to diverse habitats and fluctuating climates underscores the importance as a transitional species. Its ecological versatility foreshadows the behavioral flexibility that would become the hallmark of the human lineage. To imagine the social world of Australopithecus africanus is to step into the realm where survival depended not only on strength or speed, but on connection. These early hominins did not walk the landscape alone. They moved in small, tightly knit groups, families, bound by necessity, instinct, and the beginnings of something deeper: cooperation. In the shifting mosaic of woodlands and grasslands, every member mattered. Alone, Australopith was vulnerable. But a group could watch the horizon together, share food, protect the young, and navigate the dangers of a world filled with predators. Their social lives were likely rich with communication. Though they lacked language as we know it, their voices would have filled the air with calls, grunts, and rhythmic vocalizations. Sounds that conveyed alarm, reassurance, curiosity, and intent. Their faces, more expressive than those of modern apes, could communicate subtle emotions: fear, excitement, affection. Their hands, capable of delicate precision, may have even played a role in gestural communication, pointing, reaching, or signaling to others in a way that bridged the gap between instinct and intention. With their groups, relationships were everything. Mothers carried their infants for years, nurturing them through the long childhood that demanded patience and teaching. Youngsters learned by watching how to climb, how to forage, how to recognize danger, how to read the moods of others. Adults formed alliances, cooperated in foraging, and shared knowledge of the landscape. Males may have competed for status, but cooperation likely outweighed aggression. The pressures of predation and environmental unpredictability favored groups that worked together, not those torn apart by conflict. Grooming, a behavior shared by many primates, would have been central to their social world. Fingers combing through fur, removing debris, soothing tensions. These simple acts strengthened bonds and reinforced trust. In moments of rest, they likely huddled together for warmth and safety, their bodies forming a living circle against the night. Their social structure was not yet human, but it was no longer purely ape. It was something between, a foundation upon which the complexities of human society may one day be built. In their interactions, we glimpse the earliest roots of empathy, cooperation, and shared identity. They were learning slowly and subtly that survival was not an individual struggle, but a collective one. Reconstructing the social behavior of Australopithecus africanus requires synthesizing evidence from anatomy, comparative primatology, paleoecology, and developmental biology. While direct behavior evidence is absent, multiple lines of inference allow for a scientifically grounded reconstruction of their social world. Based on body size dimorphism, predation pressure, and ecological modeling, Australopithecus africanus likely lived in a multi-male, multi-female groups of between 10 and 30. This structure parallels that of chimpanzees and early human foragers, where group cohesion provides protection and enhances resource acquisition. Moderate sexual dimorphism in body mass and canine size suggests some degree of male-to-male competition, but not the extreme polygyny seen in gorillas. Likely a flexible mating system, possibly involving pair bonds or cooperative breeding. This intermediate pattern aligns with the species that balance competition with cooperation. Dental eruption patterns and cranial growth rates indicate a prolonged juvenile period, relative to apes. Extended childhood implies increased parental investment, opportunities for social learning, and reliance on group support for offspring survival. This developmental trajectory is a precursor to the extended childhood seen in Homo. The social complexity inferred for Australopithecus africanus represents a critical stage in hominid evolution. Their combination of extended childhood, cooperative behavior, enhanced communication, and group cohesion laid the groundwork for the emergence of highly social, culturally rich societies of Homo.
To understand the significance of Australopithecus africanus, we must follow them as they take one of the most important steps in the history of life on Earth. The one step onto two legs. Bipedalism was not simply a way of moving. It was a revolution written into bone and muscle. A transformation that reshaped the body from the ground up. When Australopithecus africanus walked across the ancient South African landscape, they carried with them the blueprint of a future that would one day define our species. Imagine them moving through the tall grasses, their heads raising above the vegetation as they scanned for predators. Their gait was steady, rhythmic, and efficient, each step conserving energy in a world where survival often depended on endurance. Their pelvis was short and bowl-shaped, cradling their internal organs as they walked upright. Their spine curved gently, absorbing the shock of each footfall. Their legs swung beneath them in a smooth arc, powered by muscles arranged in a pattern that no ape possesses. Yet, even as they walked like humans, they climbed like apes. Their arms remained long and strong, their shoulders high and mobile, fingers curved for gripping branches. When danger approached, a leopard stalking from the shadows, a saber-toothed cat crouched in the grass, they could retreat into the trees with the agility of their ancestors. They lived in two worlds at once, navigating the ground with confidence and the canopy with ease. Bipedalism opened new possibilities. It changed the way they saw the world. Some potential drivers of bipedal evolution include thermoregulation, or reduced solar exposure, efficient foraging and carrying, predator detection, long-distance travel, and freeing the hands for tool use. While no hypothesis fully explains the transition, Africanus represents a mature stage in evolution of bipedalism, integrating multiple selective pressures into a coherent anatomical package. Compared to Afarensis, Africanus shows more derived pelvic morphology, improved hip abductor mechanics, enhanced lumbar curvature. These differences suggest a refinement of bipedal locomotion over time. Bipedal adaptations of Africanus laid the biometrical foundation for the emergence of Homo, whose increased brain size and tool use would depend on energetic efficiency and manual freedom provided by upright walking. The story of Australopithecus africanus ends not with a dramatic collapse, but with a long, quiet ebb. A species gradually overtaken by forces larger than itself. For more than 1,000,000 years, they thrived in the dynamic landscapes of South Africa, moving through forests, grasslands, and limestone valleys with a blend of agility, curiosity, and social cohesion. They were adaptable, intelligent, and resilient, yet evolution is a relentless sculptor, and the world they inhabited was shifting in ways that slowly eroded their ecological foothold. During the late Pliocene and early Pleistocene, southern Africa entered a period of profound climate instability, which wasn't a single shift but a long sequence of oscillations that reshaped ecosystems at every scale. Paleoclimate evidence reveals expansion of C4 grasslands as temperatures rose and rainfall patterns shifted, shrinking woodlands and forest patches, once rich with fruits, leaves, and tubers. strong seasonal contrasts with long dry seasons punctuated by short, intense rains. Recurring drought cycles that stress plant communities. Recurring drought cycles that stress plant communities and water sources. These changes fractured mosaic habitats that Australopithecus africanus relied upon. Their mixed feeding strategy, once a strength, became a liability as predictable woodland foods became scarce. They could survive in open grasslands, but were not optimized for them. Every year, the landscape demanded more specialization, more efficiency, and more innovation. They faced competitors like Palanthropus and early Homo. Palanthropus robustus, or the specialist, lived around 2 million years ago and emerged as a formidable competitor. Their anatomy was a direct response to the dying savannas. They had enormous molars capable of grinding tough, fibrous vegetation, thick enamels resistant to wear from gritty drought-season foods, sagittal and nuchal crest anchoring powerful chewing muscles, broad reinforced faces built for mechanical efficiency. Stable isotope studies show that Palanthropus robustus consumed a higher portion of C4 plants like sedges, grasses, and hard-shelled seeds, resources that expanded as woodland shrank. In an environment trending towards aridity, the specialists thrived, while the generalists struggled. Then there was early Homo, the innovator. At the same time, early Homo species appeared with traits that fundamentally altered the evolutionary landscape. Larger brains supporting planning, memory, and social complexity. More dexterous hands capable of precision grips. Oldowan stone tools that opened new dietary pathways. A broader diet including meat, marrow, and high-fat tissues. This shift towards tool-assisted foraging was revolutionary. Early Homo could extract calories from carcasses that no Australopiths could access. They could crack bones, butcher meat, and exploit resources across a wider range of habitats. Their adaptability wasn't just physical, it was cognitive. They could innovate, experiment, and respond to environmental pressures in a way that Australopithecus africanus couldn't match. The world of Australopithecus africanus was shaped not only by climate and competition, but by constant predation. Southern Africa at the time hosted an array of formidable carnivores: Dinofelis, Meganterian, early Panthera species, Pachycrocuta, and large raptors. Taxonomic evidence shows that early hominins were frequent prey. The Taung child skull pierced by the talons is a haunting reminder that danger came from above as well. High juvenile mortality would have slowed population growth, making Africanus more vulnerable to environmental and competitive pressures. Even small declines in birth rates or survival could ripple through generations. As climate change intensified, the once continuous habitats of Africanus fractured into isolated pockets. Populations became separated by expanding grasslands, drying rivers, and shifting vegetation zones. Evolutionary modeling shows that small, isolated populations can face inbreeding depression, reducing fitness, loss of genetic diversity, limiting adaptability, demographic instability, where random events can cause collapse, reduced gene flow, preventing recovery from local declines. These pressures compound over time. A species doesn't need a single catastrophic event to disappear. It can simply fade as each generation becomes slightly smaller and slightly more vulnerable, and slightly less able to adapt. By around 2 million years ago,
the hominin landscape had transformed. Robust Australopiths and early hominin species dominated the ecological niches once shared with Africanus. This pattern mirrors a broader trend across Africa. The gradual replacement of gracile Australopiths by more specialized or more cognitively flexible descendants. The extinction of Africanus was part of a larger evolutionary turnover, a reshuffling of hominin diversity driven by climate, ecology, and innovation. They did not vanish suddenly, they dwindled over thousands of years, retreating into shrinking refuges until their populations could no longer sustain themselves. Their disappearance was quiet, almost imperceptible. But it was a pivotal transition in early human evolution. Although Australopithecus africanus did not survive into the Pleistocene, their legacy is profound. They represent a crucial stage in the evolution of habitual bipedalism, dietary flexibility, early social structures, and cognitive foundations that later hominins would expand upon. Their existence helped shape the evolutionary pathways that led to Homo. They were not evolutionary failures. They were part of the branching experimental process that defines our lineage. Their story is a reminder that extinction and innovation are intertwined, and that every species, even those that vanish, contribute to the tapestry of human origins. The legacy of Australopithecus africanus reaches far beyond the bones lifted from South Africa's ancient caves. Their discovery reshaped the foundations of how we understand ourselves. Before the Taung child emerged from the limestone in 1924, the scientific world believed humanity's origins lay in Europe or Asia, and that a large brain marked the first great leap toward becoming human. Africanus shattered that illusion. With its small brain and unmistakably upright posture, it revealed a truth many were unwilling to accept. The human story began in Africa, and bipedalism came long before the expansion of the mind. The fossils forced scientists to confront uncomfortable questions. How could a creature with such a modest brain walk upright like a human? Why did its face look both familiar and foreign? What did this mean for the cherished belief that humans were fundamentally separate from other animals? These questions struck at the heart of early 20th century anthropology, challenging assumptions shaped by cultural bias, colonial thinking, and the lingering influence of the Piltdown hoax. The Taung child didn't just introduce a new species, it dismantled an entire worldview. The impact was immediate and disruptive. The discovery ignited a revolution in paleoanthropology, overturning the brain first model and establishing the bipedal first framework that still anchors evolutionary theory today. It forced scientists to reconsider the sequence of human evolution, revealing that upright walking, not intelligence, was the earliest defining trait of our lineage. This shift reframed the search for human origins, redirecting global attention towards Africa's deep past. As more remains surfaced from Sterkfontein and Makapansgat, a clearer picture emerged. These were not primitive apes. They were early hominins, beings who walked upright, lived in social groups, and navigated a complex world with a blend of instinct and emerging intelligence. Their anatomy revealed mosaic evolution, a mix of ape-like and human-like traits evolving at different rates. Their cranial base hinted at changes in vocal tract orientation. Their teeth showed dietary flexibility. Their postcranial skeleton suggested a creature equally at home on the ground as it is in the trees. These anatomical insights forced scientists to refine comparative methods. The study of Africanus sharpened the criteria used to distinguish hominids from other primates, influencing the interpretation of later discoveries from East and South Africa. Traits such as cranial base flexion, enamel thickness, and pelvic morphology became central to reconstructing early hominin relationships. Without Africanus, this classification of species like Afarensis, Sediba, and early Homo would have unfolded very differently. The scientific impact of Africanus extended far beyond anatomy. Their study transformed excavation strategies, endocast reconstruction, taphonomic analysis, and the dating of cave deposits. Sterkfontein and Makapansgat became model sites for understanding karstic cave systems and fossil depositions. Researchers developed new methods to interpret breccia layers, reconstruct ancient environments, and identify post-depositional processes. These innovations shaped fieldwork across Africa, influencing how fossils were recovered, dated, and contextualized. Their placement within the hominin family tree sparked decades of debates. Were they direct ancestors of Homo, a southern counterpart to East African Australopiths, a side branch representing a unique adaptive environment? These debates refine phylogenetic methods, encouraging more nuanced, branching models of human evolution. Africanus became a touchstone for discussions about evolutionary radiation, regional variation, and the complexity of early hominin diversity. Their anatomy also reshaped behavioral reconstruction. The combination of bipedal locomotion, arboreal capabilities, and dietary flexibilities suggested a versatile, adaptive lifestyle. They likely foraged across mixed woodlands and savanna environments, exploiting a wide range of foods. Their social structures may have resembled those of other highly social primates, with cooperation, conflict, and communication shaping daily lives. Subtle changes in brain organization, visible in endocasts, hint at early cognitive reorganization, the beginnings of neural architecture that would eventually support symbolic thought. Beyond science, Africanus transformed public understanding of our human origin. Their discovery dismantled Eurocentric narratives and cemented Africa as a cradle of humanity. Museums, classrooms, and documentaries began to reflect a more accurate, inclusive story of our past. The Taung child became a symbol of scientific humility, a reminder that even the smallest fossil can overturn the grandest assumptions. Philosophically, their fossils remind us that humanity did not emerge fully formed, but through a long, winding journey shaped by adaptation, struggle, and chance. The traits we consider uniquely human, like cooperation, curiosity, resilience, they all have roots far deeper than once imagined. In their bones, we see the first hints of what would one day become a lineage defined not by perfection, but by experimentation. Nearly a century later, Africanus remains central to modern research. New technologies like micro-CT scanning, geometric morphometrics, and isotopic analysis continue to extract fresh insights from their bones. Their legacy endures in every debate about the origins of bipedalism, the evolution of the brain, and the ecological pressures that shaped early hominins. They remain a cornerstone of paleoanthropology, a species whose discovery continues to ripple through science, culture, and our understanding of what it means to be human. In their bones, we glimpse the earliest chapters of our story, not a straight path, but a branching, experimental journey that ultimately led to us. To fully understand Australopithecus africanus, we must step into the vanished world they once inhabited. The South African landscape long ago was alive with complexity and shaped by forces far older than the species that walked upon it. This was a land in transition, caught between the dense forests of earlier primates and the open savannas that would later shape the evolution of early Homo. Instead of a single dominant biome, the region formed a shifting mosaic of woodlands, grasslands, wetlands, and rocky highlands. Each habitat offered its own resources, dangers, and rhythms, creating a patchwork environment that demanded constant adaptation. At dawn, mist clung to the river valleys while birds called across the plains. Woodland clusters provided shade, fruit, and refuge, while the tall grasses rippled in the wind, concealing both prey and predator. Rocky outcrops rose like ancient monuments, their caves silently waiting to become the resting place of creatures who never imagined they would be found again. Life moved ceaselessly across this terrain. Herds of antelopes grazed in the open. Elephants reshaped vegetation as they pushed through brush. And hyraxes darted across sun-warmed stone. In the shadows, predators stalked with patience and precision. This was a world where survival depended on awareness, agility, and the ability to read the land. For Africanus, versatility was everything. Their bodies reflected dual existence. Long arms and curved fingers for climbing, paired with pelvis and lower limbs adapted for upright walking. They could ascend through trees to forage or escape danger, then descend and traverse open ground with the bipedal gait. Their daily lives were shaped by the search for food, the need for water, and the constant vigilance required to avoid becoming prey. They learned which trees fruited reliably, which paths offered cover, and which springs persisted through drought. Their survival depended on memory, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of their landscape. Yet this world was far from stable. Climate cycles swung between wet and dry phases, driven by Milankovitch oscillations that altered rainfall patterns, vegetation cover, and water availability. Geographical and isotopic evidence from speleothems, paleosols, and faunal enamel reveal increasing aridity beginning around 3 million years ago, along with heightened climatic variability. During dry intervals, C4 grasses expanded across the plains, reshaping herbivore diets and influencing hominin foraging strategies. Phytoliths and pollen show patchwork of C3 woodland species, sedges, reeds, and open grasslands, confirming a landscape that shifted dramatically over time. These environmental fluctuations created a world where no single strategy guaranteed survival. Selecting for a species capable of behavioral and dietary flexibility. The animals that shared this landscape paint an even richer picture of the ecosystem. Bovids indicate open grasslands. Suids reflect mixed habitats. And early baboons and columbines reveal the presence of varied primate niches. Hyraxes and small mammals point to rocky terrains, while carnivores such as Dinofelis, Meganterian, early Panthera, and giant hyenas formed formidable predator guild. Each predator occupied a different ecological role. Dinofelis specialized in ambush hunting. Meganterian delivered powerful targeted kills. Early leopards dragged carcasses into caves, and giant hyenas scavenged and hunted across wide ranges. Even the skies held danger, as large raptors capable of taking juveniles circled overhead. Taphonomic evidence such as puncture marks, bone accumulation, and cave deposits confirm that hominids lived under constant predation pressure. Water also shaped the movements of Africanus. Stable isotopes from herbivore enamel reveal reliance on both permanent and seasonal water sources, with movement between riparian zones and uplands. During drought cycles, water stress forced animals, including hominins, to travel farther and take greater risks. These patterns suggest that Africanus likely followed seasonal routes tied to water availability, adjusting their ranging behavior as the landscape shifted around them. In this demanding environment, Africanus developed a flexible ecological strategy. They foraged in woodland patches for fruits, leaves, and nuts, exploited open areas for tubers, seeds, and C4 resources. They used trees for refuge, nesting, and vantage points, and traveled seasonally between habitats. Their locomotive versatility, part arboreal, part terrestrial, allowed them to exploit a wide range of ecological opportunities. Their social structures likely reflected the pressures of predation and resource scarcity, encouraging cooperation, shared vigilance, and the transmission of knowledge about safe routes and reliable food sources. Environment variability played a crucial role in shaping their evolution. The constant need to navigate shifting habitats, unpredictable climates, and the diverse predators likely drove early cognitive reorganization, fostering improved memory, spatial awareness, and problem solving abilities. Dietary flexibility became essential, as no single food source could be relied upon year round. Bipedal locomotion continued to refine in response to the mixed terrain, offering energy efficiency across long distances and freeing their hands for carrying food or infants. These traits, such as adaptability, cooperation, cognitive flexibility, and refined bipedalism, would later become foundational to the success of Homo. Despite the dangers surrounding them, Africanus thrived as resilient, resourceful survivors deeply attuned to their environment. They were not apex predators, nor were they passive victims of their world. They were active participants in a complex ecological web, navigating a landscape that demanded innovation long before the emergence of large brains or stone tools. Their world shaped them, and in turn, they shaped the evolutionary path that would eventually lead to us. In their bones, in the sediment that entombed them, and in the ecological tapestry they navigated, we glimpse into the earliest sparks of what humanity would one day become, not through dominance, but through adaptability, curiosity, and the ability to survive in a world defined by change. The evolutionary position of Australopithecus africanus remains one of the most intriguing and contested questions in paleoanthropology. A mystery assembled from scattered fossils, ancient sediments, and shifting ecological pressures of deep time. To understand where this species fits, we must abandon the outdated image of evolution as a simple ladder and instead imagine a branching river system. Tributaries split, rejoin, or vanish entirely, leaving behind traces of paths once taken. Africanus represents one of these branching channels, a lineage that carried the currents of early hominid evolution through the pivotal period when multiple forms of ancient humans coexisted, competed, and adapted in parallel. For much of the 20th century, Africanus was celebrated as the direct ancestor of early Homo. Their upright posture, reduced dentition, and comparatively human-like facial structure seemed to point toward a lineage that would eventually give rise to toolmakers and explorers. They were cast as the bridge between early Australopiths and the dawn of humanity. Yet, as new fossils emerged from East Africa, Afarensis, Gari, Sediba, and early Homo species, the evolutionary picture grew more complex. It became clear that evolution had not followed a single path, but had experimented with multiple forms of hominids simultaneously, each adapting in different landscapes and ecological pressures. In this richer, more dynamic framework, Africanus could no longer be assumed to sit neatly in a straight line that led to us. Morphological comparisons reveal why their placement is so challenging. Africanus displays a mosaic of traits, some derived and more human like, while others were primitive and reminiscent of earlier Australopiths. They reduce facial prognathism, parabolic dental arcade, increased cranial base flexion, and refined bipedal adaptations suggest evolutionary advancement. Yet their long arms, curved phalanges, moderate canine dimorphism, and small cranial capacity anchor them firmly within the broader Australopith grade. This blend of traits complicates phylogenetic interpretation and has fueled multiple competing hypotheses about their evolutionary role. Cladistic analysis reflect this diversity of interpretations. One hypothesis proposes that Africanus is a direct ancestor of Homo, supported by evidence of dental reduction, facial gracialization, pelvic morphology trending toward human, and signs of early brain reorganization. However, the temporal overlap between Africanus and early Homo complicates the scenario, suggesting that if they contributed to our lineage, they did so indirectly, or as part of a broader interbreeding population structure. A second hypothesis positions Africanus as the southern sister taxon of Afarensis, implying that both species represent regional variants of widespread Australopith complex that evolved in parallel rather than sequentially. A third hypothesis argues that Africanus may have given rise to Sediba, whose anatomy blends Australopith and Homo-like traits in a way that echo Africanus morphology. A fourth interpretation views Africanus as a side branch, a lineage that thrived for over 1 million years but ultimately did not contribute directly to the emergence of Homo. Based on its retention of arboreal traits, lack of stone tool evidence, and cranial morphology distinct from early human species. Geography adds another layer of complexity. The South African cave systems where Africanus fossils were found suggest a degree of regional isolation from East African hominid populations. This separation may have limited gene flow, allowing southern Australopiths to follow their own evolutionary trajectories. Their temporal range overlaps with several other hominids, including Afarensis, Gari, early Homo, and later Paranthropus robustus, revealing a landscape where multiple species coexisted and adapted to diverse ecological niches. In this environment, Africanus appears to have adopted a generalist strategy, flexible diet, capable of both arboreal and terrestrial contexts, and behaviorally adaptable in ways that foreshadowed later hominid versatility. Although no genetic material survives, developmental patterns inferred from dental eruption and cranial growth suggest intermediate maturation rates, extended juvenile dependency, and increased resilience on social learning. These traits align more closely with Homo than with earlier Australopiths, hinting at cognitive and social shifts that may have influenced later evolutionary pathways. Even if Africanus was not a direct ancestor, their presence shaped the ecological and behavioral landscape from which early Homo emerged. Today, most researchers agree on a nuanced middle ground. Africanus was a part of a broader Australopith radiation that explored multiple evolutionary possibilities. They may not sit on the direct line to modern humans, but they contributed to the adaptive context that made the rise of Homo possible. Their anatomy, behavior, and ecological strategies represent a critical transitional stage, not the final stage before humanity, but one of the essential steps that expanded the range of what early hominins could become. In their bones, we see not a single ancestral pathway, but a network of evolutionary experiments. Africanus reminds us that evolution is not destiny, but exploration, a branching dynamic process shaped by chance, environment, and innovation. Through their existence, the path towards humanity becomes clearer, richer, and far more fascinating.
The story of Australopithecus africanus is not written in a single fossil, but in a constellation of extraordinary discoveries, each one a window into a life lived millions of years ago. These remains are more than bones. They're characters in a deep time narrative, each carrying its own mystery, its own tragedy, its own revelation. They emerge from caves, quarries, and ancient breccias like voices rising from the earth. Some are delicate, almost fragile. Others are robust, weathered by geological time. All of them speak, if we know how to listen. For the Taung child, the tale begins in 1924 in a limestone quarry in South Africa, where workers unearthed a small skull encased in rock. When Raymond Dart first held it in his hands, he recognized something the scientific world was not yet ready to accept. A juvenile hominin with a small brain, but unmistakably upright posture. The Taung child's face is delicate, with rounded cheeks and forward-facing eyes that seem to meet our gaze across nearly 3 million years. The foramen magnum sits centrally beneath the skull, a quiet but decisive anatomical signature of bipedalism. This single feature challenged the reigning assumption that big brains came first, and upright walking came later. Inside the skull, the natural endocast preserves the earliest hints of human-like brain organization. Expanded parietal association areas and a posteriorly shifted lunate sulcus suggest that neurological reorganization began long before the dramatic brain enlargement seen in later hominids. But the Taung child story is not only one of evolutionary insight, it's a story of predation. The puncture marks in the eye socket match the talons of modern crowned eagles. In a haunting reconstruction, we can imagine the moment: a child exploring the savanna margin, a shadow overhead, a sudden strike. Its death, tragic and swift, became the most important clues to the dangers early hominins faced. The Taung child is both a revelation and a reminder that our lineage emerged not in triumph, but in vulnerability. Two decades later, in the caves of Sterkfontein, another face emerged from the stone. STS-5, affectionately known as Miss Pless. Remains of one of the most iconic hominid crania ever discovered. Its features are a blend of ancient and modern, reduced prognathism, a gently curved dental arcade, and a cranial capacity of roughly 485 cc's. The skull is beautifully preserved, almost serene. The zygomatic arches flare just enough to suggest powerful chewing muscles. Yet the overall facial structure is surprisingly gracile. The forward placed foramen magnum and flexed cranial base reinforce the species' commitment to upright walking. For decades, debates swirled around the fossil sex. Was Miss actually a Mister? Cranial metrics and pelvic comparisons have suggested possible male identity, but the nickname persists.
a reminder that fossils often carry the biases and assumptions of the people who name them. Regardless of sex, STS5 became a public face of Australopithecus africanus. It is a skull that appears in textbooks, documentaries, and museum displays, a symbol of the Australopith's place in the human story. STS5 gives us a face, but STS14 gave us a body. This partial skeleton includes pelvis, lumbar vertebrae, and ribs. These offer some of the clearest evidence of habitual bipedalism in early hominins. The pelvis is short and broad, with flaring ilia that stabilize the trunk during upright walking. The lumbar vertebrae curve into pronounced lordosis, creating shock-absorbing spine characteristic with efficient bipeds. Yet, the upper body tells a different story. The rib cage retains more conical ape-like shape. The shoulders sit high, slightly rotated. The arms, though not fully preserved, suggest strength and mobility suited for climbing. This duality, a walker below, a climber above, reflect a species navigating mosaic environment. Australopithecus africanus moved confidently on the ground, but still relied on the trees for safety, foraging, and perhaps even sleep. STS14 captures this transitional moment in our evolutionary history, when hominids lived between worlds. Amongst the enigmatic objects associated with Africanus is a small, reddish jasperite stone known as the Makapansgat pebble. Its natural markings resemble a human face, two dark eyes, a lighter mouth, and an overall oval shape. The pebble's geological source lies roughly 5 kilometers away from the cave where it was found. No natural process could have transported it there. Someone, almost certainly an Australopith, carried it. But why? The pebble's not a tool. It shows no signs of modification. It is not evidence of symbolism or art. But it does suggest something subtler. Pattern recognition. Curiosity. The ability to see a face in an object and find it interesting enough to keep. It's a small gesture, but a profound one. A hint of the cognitive seeds that would one day blossom into symbolism, art, and meaning-making. Beyond the famous specimens, a constellation of additional fossils enriches our understanding of Australopithecus africanus. STW-252, a facial skeleton. This expands the known range of craniofacial variation within the species. STW-505, with its robust features. This fuels debate about sexual dimorphism and population density. Extensive dental assemblages reveal dietary flexibility, microwear patterns, and developmental timing. Evidence of a species capable of adapting to shifting environments and varied food sources. Each specimen adds nuance to the portrait, reminding us that Africanus was not a monolith, but a diverse, dynamic population. Most Africanus fossils come from cave breccias. Dense cemented deposits formed through a combination of vertical shaft entrapment, carnivore activity, sediment infill, and calcite cementation. These caves act as natural traps and accidental archives, preserving bones with remarkable fidelity. But this preservation comes with challenges. The complex stratigraphy of the cave systems makes dating difficult. Fossils can be reworked, displaced, or mixed across layers. Researchers must navigate a geological puzzle, piecing together not just bones, but the context that gave them meaning. Even so, sites like Sterkfontein and Makapansgat remain among the richest sources of early hominin fossils in the world, offering unparalleled insight into the lives of our ancestors. Taken together, these fossils illuminate the evolutionary trajectory of early hominins. They reveal that habitual bipedalism paired with they can reveal habitual bipedalism paired with retained arboreal abilities, early cortical reorganization preceding brain enlargement, dietary adaptability, and developmental patterns, morphological variations within the species, clues to cognition and object selection. Through these specimens, the past is not silent. It speaks, in bone, in stone, in traces of lives lived long before our own. And in the fossils of Australopithecus africanus, we hear some of the earliest whispers of what would one day become humanity. Understanding the mind of Australopithecus africanus requires stepping into a cognitive landscape suspended between two evolutionary worlds, the instinct-driven awareness of an ape and the emerging spark of something distinctly human. Their brains were small, comparable in size to those of modern chimpanzees, yet their behavior reveals a complexity that cannot be measured by volume alone. Intelligence is not simply a matter of size, it's a matter of structure, organization, and ways in which the brain interprets and responds to the world. What emerges from the fossil record, comparative primate studies, and ecological inference is a portrait of a mind in transition, a mind capable of memory, cooperation, problem solving, and emotional nuance. A mind that carried the earliest embers of a cognitive fire that would one day define our species. Imagine a small group of Australopithecus africanus moving through a mosaic environment of woodlands, grasslands, and rocky outcrops. They follow familiar paths with practiced confidence, recalling the locations of fruiting trees, seasonal water sources, and safe sleeping sites tucked high in the branches. Their navigation is not random. It's guided by long-term spatial memory, shaped by years of experience. They recognize one another: mothers, infants, siblings, allies, and rivals. Subtle shifts in posture, facial expression, or vocal tone carry meaning. A raised brow ridge signals tension. A soft grunt reassures. A sharp bark warns of a leopard in the grass. Their communication is layered, flexible, and responsive to context. This is not instinct alone. It's learned behavior, refined through observation, imitation, and social teaching. Knowledge is passed from one generation to the next: which plants are edible, which roots hide beneath the soil, which stones can crack nuts or dig for tubers. In these small acts of transmission, we see the earliest roots of culture. Their hands, capable of precision grips, open new cognitive possibilities. When Australopithecus picks up a stick, a stone, or a bone, They're not merely manipulating objects, they're experimenting with cause and effect. A stick inserted into a termite mound yields food, a stone dropped on a nut produces a crack, a bone used to dig reveals hidden tubers. They did not shape tools, but they understand that objects can be used to solve problems. This is instrumental intelligence, the foundation upon which later technological innovations would be built. Their manual dexterity, combined with emerging neural reorganization, hints at a mind increasingly capable of planning, experimentation, and adaptation. Their social world demands emotional intelligence. Africanus likely lived in multi-male, multi-female groups with complex hierarchies and shifting alliances. They groom one another to reinforce bonds, comfort distressed infants, and mediate conflicts through gestures and vocalization. These behaviors require empathy, memory, and an understanding of social dynamics, traits that would later define human societies. Extended juvenile dependency further implies social learning. Young Australopiths spend years observing adults, practicing foraging techniques, and observing unwritten rules of group life. The prolonged childhood creates space for learning, imitation, and slow acclimation of knowledge. In the quiet moments of their lives, resting in shade, grooming companions, watching the horizon for predators, their minds are not empty. They're processing, remembering, anticipating. They are learning from the world and from each other. Their intelligence is not yet human, but it's no longer purely animal. It's something in between, a mind in transition, shaped by survival, but reaching towards something more. The cognitive abilities of Africanus can be inferred from multiple lines of evidence. Cranial capacities range from 420 to 510 cc's, overlapping with chimpanzees, yet endocasts reveal extended parietal association areas, posteriorly displaced lunate sulcus, an incipient Broca's cap, increased hemispheric asymmetry, and greater cortical complexity than earlier Australopiths. These features suggest enhanced motor planning, vocal control, and integrative processing. Living in complex shifting environment requires long-term memory of resource locations, seasonal tracking of fruiting cycles, awareness of predator territories, navigation between arboreal and terrestrial routes. Such demands correlate with enhanced hippocampal development in primates. Moderate sexual dimorphism and extended juvenile dependency imply multi-male, multi-female groups, cooperative behaviors, conflict mediation, and alliance formations. These behaviors require emotional regulation and early forms of theory-mind reasoning. Endocast morphology supports enhanced vocal control. Likely communication modes included graded vocalizations, predator-specific alarm calls, gestural communication, facial expressions, and rhythmic calls for group cohesion. Their communication system was likely more nuanced than that of modern apes. Extended childhood suggests prolonged learning periods, intergenerational knowledge transfer, imitation and observational learning, and implicit teaching behaviors. These processes form the foundation of proto-culture. While no stone tools are directly associated with Africanus, their anatomy indicates precision grip capabilities, manual dexterity, object manipulation, and opportunistic tool use. These traits align with cognitive prerequisites for later technological innovation. They had foraging intelligence, and dietary flexibility required nut cracking, termite probing, extraction of underground storage units, even opportunistic scavenging. These behaviors demand planning, experimentation, and adaptability. High predation pressure selected for rapid threat recognition, coordinated group responses, memory of safe refuges, and even anticipatory behavior. These traits correlate with increased prefrontal cortex involvement. The cognitive profile of Australopithecus africanus represents a transitional stage in human evolution, a blend of ape-like instincts and emerging human-like intelligence. Their minds were shaped by social complexity, environmental challenges, and the demand of survival. They possessed enhanced social intelligence, improved environmental awareness, early forms of problem solving, rudimentary proto-culture, and neural reorganization preceding brain expansion. In Africanus, we see the earliest sparks of the cognition revolution that would later define the genus Homo. Their minds were not yet human, but they were moving unmistakably in that direction, carrying forward the first glimmers of intelligence that would one day reshape the world. The technological story of Australopithecus africanus begins not with crafted stone tools or deliberate engineering, but with a shift in perception, a growing awareness that the world was full of objects that could be used. Their hands, their minds, their environments converged to create the earliest sparks of technological behavior. These sparks would not ignite into a full fire until the rise of Homo. But in Africanus, we see the first glimmers of a species learning to shape its world through action. They lived in a landscape that demanded ingenuity. Hard-shelled nuts resisted teeth, roots hid behind dense soil. Termite mounds held rich protein behind hardened walls. Bones left by predators contained marrow locked inside thick cortical layers. In such a world, the ability to use objects as tools was not optional. It was a survival advantage. Picture an Australopith crouched beside a fallen branch. They lift it, testing its weight, its flexibility. With a few probing movements, they insert it into a termite mound. Insects spill out. The individuals watch, learn, adjust. A second Australopith selects a smooth stone, turning it over in their hands, feeling its edges. They strike it against a nut. The first blow is too soft. The second is too hard. The third, just right. The shell cracks. These are not manufactured tools. They're not shaped, sharpened, or intentionally modified, but they are tools in a functional sense. Objects chosen, carried, and used with purpose. Their hands make it possible. Africanus possessed a well-developed opposable thumb, broad distal phalanges, and muscular architecture needed for precision grip. They could pinch, grasp, rotate, and manipulate objects with a level of comfort. And manipulate objects with a level of control unmatched by any ape. This dexterity opened cognitive doors, allowing them to explore the physical properties of their environment and learn through experimentation. Each interaction taught them something new about cause and effect. A stone's hardness, a branch's leverage, a bone's scraping potential. These lessons accumulated across lifetimes and generations. Their tool use was opportunistic rather than planned. They did not shape stones into edges for cutting or craft wooden spears, but they understood that the world was full of potential instruments. A bone could scrape, a stone could crack, and a stick could dig. This understanding represents the earliest steps toward technological revolution, and this would later define Homo. It is the cognitive shift, not the artifact, that marks the dawn of technology. Their relationship with tools was not purely functional, it was cognitive and social. Young Australopiths watched adults manipulate objects, imitating their actions, refining their techniques. Knowledge spread through the group, not through language, but through observation, repetition, and shared experience. Extended juvenile dependency created long learning periods. Infants clung to mothers, watching every movement. Juveniles practiced with sticks and stones, experimenting with the world. Adults demonstrated, not intentionally, but through the simple act of living. In this transmission of behavior, we see the faint outlines of protoculture, shared practices that bind a community together. The hands of Africanus show features associated with fine motor control, a well-developed opposable thumb, enhanced flexor pilosus longus function, broad distal phalanges, precision grip capabilities, and increased cortical bone thickness and metacarpals. These traits support object manipulation and exploratory behavior. Modern chimpanzees and capuchin monkeys use tools extensively despite lacking the anatomical refinement seen in Australopithecus. This suggests that Australopiths were likely capable of termite fishing, nutcracking, digging for tubers, using stones as precision tools, using bones as digging implements. These behaviors require cognitive flexibility and problem solving. The earliest known stone tools, the Lomekwi assemblage at 3.3 million years, predate Australopithecus africanus. This indicates that tool use existed among earlier hominins. Africanus likely inherited or independently developed similar behaviors. Raymond Dart once proposed an osteodontochoratic culture, interpreting bone acclimations as deliberate tools. Later researchers disputed this, attributing the assemblage to carnivore activity. However, some bone fragments show wear consistent with digging or scraping. These represent opportunistic tools rather than intentional or manufactured. Tool use requires casual reasoning, motor planning, memory of successful strategies, and social learning. Endocast evidence suggests early reorganization of the brain regions associated with these functions. Tool use would have provided access to high-calorie marrow, nutrient-rich termites, tubers, and hard-shelled nuts. These resources were critical during seasonal scarcity. The tool related to behaviors of Australopithecus africanus represent a pivotal evolutionary moment, a cognitive bridge between ape-level tool use and the deliberate planned technology of early Homo. They did not create tools in the archaeological sense, but possessed the manual dexterity, cognitive capacity, and ecological motivation to use objects as tools. In Africanus, we witnessed the dawn of technology, not in crafted artifacts, but in a shift of mind that made tool use possible. They stand at the threshold of innovation, their hands and minds preparing the way for the technological explosion that would one day reshape the planet.
The story of Australopithecus africanus was not written with deliberate burials in ritual spaces, but in deep, silent caves of South Africa, natural vaults that preserved their bones through chance rather than intention. Their deaths came from falls, predators, and hazards of rugged landscape, yet the geological processes that followed transformed these tragedies into scientific treasures. The cradle of humankind's karstic terrain was riddled with vertical shafts and hidden openings. Many animals, including hominins, slipped into the natural traps. Some died instantly, others succumbed to their injuries or thirst. Predators also contributed to cave assemblages. Leopards dragged their prey into sheltered dens, hyenas gnawed bones, and in rare cases, giant eagles left talon marks on small skulls, as seen in the Taung child. Inside these caves, time moved slowly. Storms washed in sediments, roof spall accumulated, and calcite dripped from the ceilings, sealing bones beneath flowstone. These layers preserved delicate structures but complicated dating, required careful stratigraphic and isotopic analysis. There is no evidence that Australopithecus africanus buried their dead or treated bodies symbolically. Their remains entered caves through natural processes, not cultural ones. Yet, each fossil, encased in breccia, marked by predators, or preserved in flowstone, offers a window into their lives, their environment, and the forces that shape their world. The caves are not cemeteries, but archives. Through them, we glance the fragility of early hominin existence and the extraordinary geological luck that allowed their story to survive. Around 2.5 million years ago, Africa entered a period of climate instability. Rainfall patterns shifted, drought intensified. One stable mosaic of woodlands and grasslands became unpredictable. In this crucible of change, a new lineage emerged, early Homo, carrying subtle but transformative innovations. These hominids had slightly larger brains, 600 to 700 cc's, flatter faces, and smaller teeth than their Australopith predecessors. Their hands were more dexterous, with enhanced precision grips and stronger thumb-to-finger opposition. These anatomical shifts supported a behavior revolution, the deliberate shaping of stone. Oldowan tools, simple cores, flakes, and hammerstones allowed early Homo to butcher carcasses, extract marrow, and process plants with unprecedented efficiency. Early Homo ranged widely across diverse habitats, demonstrating adaptability that Africanus couldn't match. Their cognitive abilities, improved motor planning, early prefrontal expansion, and emergent hemispheric specialization supported flexible problem solving and more nuanced communication. As early Homo spread and innovated, Africanus found itself increasingly constrained. The newcomers could exploit resources inaccessible to Australopiths, navigating shifting environments, and survive ecological pressure that were intensifying across southern Africa. The rise of Homo was not a sudden leap, but a gradual shift, a new way of thinking, and interacting with the world that set the stage for everything that would follow. The extinction of Australopithecus africanus was not a dramatic collapse, but a slow fading shaped by climate, competition, and ecological change. As Africa's climate oscillated between wetter and drier extremes, woodlands contracted and grasslands expanded, the foods Africanus relied upon became less predictable, and their once familiar habitats fragmented into isolated patches. In this changing world, new competitors thrived. Paranthropus robustus, with its massive jaws and specialized teeth, excelled at processing tough grasses and sedges that dominated open landscapes. Early Homo, armed with stone tools and broader dietary strategies, could access meat, marrow, plants and resources unavailable to Australopiths. Predation still remained a constant threat. Leopards, hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and eagles all targeted vulnerable individuals, especially juveniles. High predation rates combined with shrinking habitats led to population fragmentations. Small, isolated groups suffered reduced genetic diversity and a lower resilience to environmental stress. Africanus lacked the technological flexibility of Homo and the extreme specialization of Paranthropus. As ecosystems shifted, they found themselves caught between two more competitive lineages. Over time, their fossils became rarer, their populations dwindled, and eventually they disappeared entirely. Their extinction was not a failure, but a part of the natural rhythm of evolution. They endured for over 1 million years, far longer than Homo sapiens have existed, and their disappearance opened ecological space for the rise of early Homo. Australopithecus africanus occupies a foundational place in the human story. Their fossils preserved in South African caves reveal a species that refined upright walking, explored new cognitive possibilities, and lived in socially complex groups long before the emergence of Homo. Their anatomy shows key advancements in bipedalism, improved pelvic structure, enhanced hip mechanics, and increased lumbar curvature. These refinements made long-distance walking more efficient and laid the biomechanical groundwork for the endurance capabilities of later Homo species. Their brains, though small, show early reorganization, expanded parietal regions, emerging Broca's areas, and increased cortical complexity. These changes foreshadowed the neural architecture required for language, toolmaking, and symbolic thought. Their dietary flexibility, spanning C3 and C4 plants, hard fallback foods, and occasional animal protein, prefigured the broad omnivory of early Homo. Their extended juvenile development and cooperative social structures hint at early roots of cultural transmission and social intelligence. Phylogenetically, Australopithecus africanus represents a crucial branch of the Australopith radiation. Whether directly ancestral to Homo or part of a sister lineage, they shaped the ecological and anatomical context for which early humans emerged. Their discovery shifted scientific understanding towards Africa as the cradle of humankind and overturned the outdated brain-first models of evolution. The legacy of Australopithecus africanus lives on in our bodies, our cognition, and our social nature. They were not merely a step on the path to humanity. They were the architects of the condition that made humanity possible.